I guess, good morning, everyone. It's good to be together this morning. As Corey said, we are in our Lent series from Beauty from Ashes this last Wednesday. For those of you that haven't been raised in church, throughout the historic church calendar, this last Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. So how many of you got some ash on your face out of that? Yeah? Okay. And so that's sort of historic tradition in the church, and we participate along with that. And in our series, we're looking at the book of Isaiah, and Isaiah follows that framework, Beauty from Ashes. So we work with the Bible Project. That looks super complicated, doesn't it? But it's less complicated than you think. And if you have not seen the Bible Project videos or their resources, I would highly recommend you take a good hard look at what they do, because they do a good job of trying to give overviews of how the books of the Bible work and how they work together. And so we are now finding ourselves down in 7. Yeah, there it is. There it is. We're in this little section here where what we're going to be looking at is a section of Isaiah that is still in the classic judgment section. So Isaiah breaks neatly into two sections, from 1 to 39 and then 40 to 66. And so we are squarely in the judgment section, which is great, because we all, just want to hear more about judgment, right? Woo, there's one woo, okay. One sick individual. It's like, woo, okay. That doesn't sound great, but actually it makes sense of the world that we live in. What I love about the Bible is it makes sense of the world that we live in. It doesn't just tell us about some other world. It tells us about the world that we are in. And I'm sure that each one of us looks around right now and says, things are not as they should be. The world is not the way it should be. If God were to interact in the world in the way that I understand him to be, it would be different. If he is good, if he is kind, if he is merciful, the truth does matter. It should be different. And so what I want to do is take a quick look at the video that will show us just this little section that we're in, and then we're going to talk about how this section of Isaiah leads us to understand this specific part of God's judgment. So let's watch that briefly.
And Isaiah suddenly realizes just how corrupt he and his people Israel are. And he's certain that he's going to be destroyed by God's holiness, but he's not. God's holiness, in the form of this burning coal, comes and burns him, but not to destroy. Rather, it purifies him from his sin. And as Isaiah ponders the strange experience, God commissions him with a very difficult task. He is to keep announcing this coming judgment, but because Israel has reached a point of no return, his warnings are going to have a paradoxical effect of hardening the people. But Isaiah is to trust God's plan. Israel is going to be chopped down like a tree and left like a stump in a field. And that stump will itself be scorched and burned. But after all of that burning, God says that this smoldering stump is a holy seed that will survive into the future. It's a small sign of hope, but who or what is that holy seed? The rest of this section offers an answer. Isaiah confronts Ahaz, a descendant of David and a king of Jerusalem, and he announces his downfall. God says that it's the great empire of Assyria who will first chop Israel down and devastate the land, but there's hope. Because of God's promise to David, he's going to send, after this destruction, a new king named Immanuel, which means God with us. And Immanuel's kingdom is going to set God's people free from violent, oppressive empires. And Isaiah describes this coming king as a small shoot of new growth that will emerge from the old stump of David's family. It's this king that's the holy seed from chapter 6. And the king is going to be empowered by God's Spirit to rule over a new Jerusalem and bring justice for the poor, and all nations will look to this messianic king for guidance. His kingdom will transform all creation, bringing peace.
So I wonder, much like Isaiah is trying to process for his people, I wonder how you process disappointment. Like when it's clear to you what God should do, and then he's not doing it. Anybody ever had that experience? I think that's yes. Okay, yes. It's clear that God should do something about the health of my friend. God should do something about this moment with my job. God should do something with the life of my kid, my friend. There's this thing happening that obviously, if God is who he says he is, it would be different. And it's not changing. See, we can manage disappointment when it's with people that we know are fallible, right? Like that they make mistakes. We still get disappointed, don't get me wrong. Disappointed with a parent, with a friend. Why would you do this? Why didn't you do that? Right now, you are probably aware of someone who's disappointed with you. Is that If you don't know, there is. Let me just tell you there is. Someone's disappointed with you right now. And you have a way of managing that. You say, well, there's only so much I can do, or, there's limitations on what I'm able to do, or you want me to do that, but you're not thinking about the fact there's other things that I have to do. I have to carry things in tension, so I can only do so many things at once, right? You have a way of managing that. We're generally not quite as gracious in the disappointments we have for others, because we don't think about all the things they're managing, or maybe their awareness of their capacity, but we can make sense of it because we realize people have certain capacities, they have abilities. There's gaps, right? What they can and can't do. They're not limitless. But we can't do that as well with God, because he can do it, because he is able to do it. Now, that's just you personally. Think about how much weirder this gets when you think about like collective groups of people. The moment Isaiah finds himself in is with a king who's clearly being told by God what he should and shouldn't do, and he's standing in a line of kings that have been told what to do, and he's not doing those things. Actually, he's winging it. He's sort of trying to pull together some different ways of behaving that he can sort of use what is up to his ability, not trusting in God. He sends gold and silver to this kingdom to try not to get invaded. He tries to do all these little tricks to try to protect his people from his position of leadership. Frankly, I'm sure there are many people around him who said, that's pretty smart. You're making some smart moves. But Isaiah is standing there and saying, you're not making smart moves because God has told you what to do and you're not doing it. You're not trusting in God. I mean, can you imagine a world where leaders are doing things for their own gain? They're not considering the good of the people. They're considering about their own political positioning. I mean, I know it's a hard stretch. They're buying into an ideology that doesn't align anything with God's heart. I know it's hard to stretch your mind that far. But you can imagine even as God's people being like, well, what are we supposed to do with this? How do we manage not just our own personal disappointments, but like disappointments with leaders? I mean, I'm sure it's not here, but there are places where people are disappointed with churches. It's not common, but every once in a while, a pastor doesn't do what you think they're supposed to do. They don't say what you think they're supposed to say. They don't say it in the way that you want it to be said. I know it's unusual. I'm sure you've never experienced this, but I've heard rumor of this. Occasionally, my emails tell me that people are disappointed. Occasionally, it's very rare. And it doesn't seem to change. Just seems like it's the way it is. And here comes Isaiah the prophet to say, I want to say something about this. The things he says about the judgment of God offer a seed of hope in the way that Tim Mackey from the Bible Project said a moment ago. I'm going to read a bunch of Bible at you in a row, and it's Bible from this little section of Scripture that I'm willing to bet if you were raised in church, you've heard before, but you might not have known the context in which it was spoken. This is the context. A confrontation with a king who's trying to find his own way, enemies of God surrounding, seeming that the hopes and the promises of God are lost, roughly around 700 years before Christ. 700 years before Christ, this is all happening. And it's been a miracle that God's people even exist, right? If you've read the story of the Bible, I mean, from one man, Abraham, they overcome all of this incredible stuff and slavery and mess. And here they stand, and it looks like they're about to be destroyed when all the promises have not yet been fulfilled. It looks like this is all going to fail. And these are the verses. I'll read a few. Isaiah chapter 7. Then Isaiah said, "Hear now, you house of David. Is it not enough to try the patience of human? Will you try the patience of my God also? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son. They will call him Immanuel. He will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. For before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread will be laid waste. The Lord will bring on you and your people and on the house of your father a time unlike any since Ephraim broke away from Judah. He will bring the king of Assyria." Anybody recognize that text? It's one that's generally read at Christmas, right? Because we now, standing in light of where we are, see that Isaiah is prophesying about the birth of Jesus. What does that have to do with anything going on? Oh, it only gets weirder. Moving down, chapter 9. "Therefore, there will be no gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light, and those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation, increased their joy. They rejoice before you, as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing plunder. For as the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, every warrior's boot used in battle, and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning and fuel for the fire." And here it is. "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness. From that time on and forever, the zeal of the Lord will accompany this." Who's that? Are we allowed to say it's Jesus? That doesn't seem to make sense in light of what's going on. You just told us everything going on. Why is he talking about Jesus? That's 700 years in the future. But we look at these passages, the New Testament does, and says that's Jesus. You want one more? So we're like, okay, I'm already here. Think you're going to read it anyway, and I am. Isaiah chapter 11. "A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit." And here it is. "The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, a spirit of wisdom, of understanding, a spirit of counsel and of might, a spirit of knowledge and a fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist." This is a part that tends to be quoted the most. "The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together. And a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear. The young will lie down together. And the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den. The young child will put his hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the seas." The New Testament sees these passages, the New Testament writers, 700 years later, and they pull them naturally and easily forward and say, these are the things that have been pointing towards Jesus. We have to recognize that the story of the Hebrew Scriptures, often referred to as the Old Testament, say that there's supposed to be a fulfillment of this king, this one that will set everything to right. And prophets throughout the Hebrew Scriptures are pointing. They're saying, someday, all of these little pictures you see of a priest and of a sacrifice and of a king, of a prophet, these will be fulfilled in one that we will call the Anointed one that will stand above the rest, that will be the Messiah, the one that will rescue his people and set everything to right. Passages like the ones we read refer to that. The New Testament is not unclear about how they see that these prophets were doing this. And by the way, people were scanning the horizon looking for this Messiah, and they were studying passages just like this one and asking, how do we know what the Messiah will look like? For example, John chapter 12. Even after Jesus had performed so many signs, as all the way with Jesus, in their presence, they still would not believe him. This was to fulfill the word, and here it is, of Isaiah the prophet. Lord, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For this reason they could not believe, because as Isaiah says elsewhere, he has blinded their eyes, hardened their hearts, so they can neither see with their eyes, nor understand with their hearts, nor turn, and I would heal them. And here's the key. Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. So John is saying Isaiah, 700 years back, could see through and see Jesus. And in the middle of a present crisis, Isaiah starts talking about something that's going to be in 700 years. But that we have to mix with another problem, which is it seems as though the prophets are doing this, but sometimes they don't know they're doing it. So they're saying things that they think are speaking to the moment, but they're actually saying something that speaks to the future. Does this make sense? So even within their own consciousness, they're not entirely sure why they're saying this right now. Peter says it really directly in 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 20 and 21. Listen how Peter says it. He says, above all, you must understand that no prophecy of Scripture came about by the prophet's own interpretation of things. For prophecy never had its origin in the human will, but prophets, though human, spoke from God as though they were carried along by the Holy Spirit. Isn't that interesting? So Isaiah's standing there with Ahaz, just to kind of bring it all together. He's standing there with Ahaz, and he's looking at this mess, and God starts to reveal things to him. And so he starts saying these things, and you can imagine even in this moment, Isaiah's kind of thinking, I think I'm talking to this issue, but then 700 years later, we say, no, you're actually talking to a whole different thing. That this moment that you're in time is actually a type of something that humans are going to experience for all time. That we're always going to live in times when governments don't do what they're supposed to do, when leaders aren't everything we hope they would be, when there's disappointments that are at hand. And yet, in this moment, I'm going to tell you something that's important about now, but something that's really important for all of time. That's how prophecy in the Old Testament works. This is important for us to get this straight as we're going to think about this whole book of Isaiah, because he keeps doing this. There are so many passages in Isaiah that point to Jesus that many commentators refer to Isaiah as the fifth gospel. It's as though Isaiah is constantly talking about Jesus without knowing why he's talking about Jesus. And I'm going to tell you why that's important in just a second, but it's important that you realize that this is how prophets in the Old Testament works. Prophets in the Old Testament are forth-tellers, not foretellers. Here's what I mean by that. They're saying something in the moment that draws forth what's true of how God works, that finds its culmination in the future. Each one of the prophecies of Isaiah do relate to the moment, but they kind of see through to another moment. They point to something where there'll be a fulfillment past this moment. This is not a small thought when we think about our lives. See, often, the ways that God speaks to us is not just about the moment we're in. The disappointments we have in our life. God isn't just supremely interested in managing your life for you. I know that that's a newsflash. It's a newsflash that, believe it or not, God is up to a plan that he invites you into, as opposed to you having a plan that you're inviting God into. This is not a small thought. It's worth thinking about for a moment. God refuses to be a means to an end in your life. He refuses to be the kind of God that you come to and say, God, I've got this great plan about how my marriage works, how things work with my kids, the kind of job I'm going to need, and then I'm going to be able to do some pretty great stuff from you right around the time I get my first Ferrari, maybe my second one. And once I get the car that I need and the house I need, and if my kids are completely healthy, and if my marriage does exactly what I need it to do, and if my boss will stop behaving this way, we are going to do some great stuff, you and I. Now listen, I know what I just said sounds like a joke, but it's worth evaluating that way of thinking against your prayer life. It's worth evaluating that way of thinking and feeling against the sort of emotional map of your life. It's worth thinking through, how do I process my disappointments? How do I process the disappointments of maybe the nation I live in or the world that I find myself in? You guys realize that you and I live in America where we live under the incredibly strange assumption that the world is supposed to do what we want it to do. The governments should align with our values. I mean, do you know that most of the world doesn't even have that as an assumption? I mean, if you're a follower of Jesus in Iran, you don't go protest. If you're a follower of Jesus in China, it doesn't even occur to you that your government is going to help facilitate your faith, or that the school you send your kids to are going to somehow mirror what you think is the right kind of ethics because you're a follower of Jesus. That doesn't even occur to them. And let alone we feel entitled to burn the world down because a teacher says something we find mildly offensive. Anybody find that strange? See, right now we're I haven't until right now. Listen, I'm not saying we shouldn't use our rights as Americans to do all these kinds of things. I'm not trying to make a political statement. Some of you are like, that's right, go get them, Jay. No, I'm talking about anybody in America, any side. You're like, those other guys don't get it. No, we all don't get it because it's born into us as Americans. It's a strange phenomenon. And that boils all the way down to many Christians' individual faith because they believe somehow our little individualistic plan is what God is beholden to. Listen, brothers and sisters. He is not. The great message of the gospel of Jesus Christ is this, is that in the midst of the mess of this world that we live in, there is a light that is shining. There is a God who has made a way in Jesus Christ, one who bore the sins of the world onto his body, one who can bring justice and hope and peace to the world, and his name is Jesus. And to the degree that you can fix your eyes on him and allow his life to be lived in you, to the degree you can do that, you can live in the future kingdom of all hope and all peace and all love and all joy in the midst of this world. And the sign that you live in that peace and in that kingdom and in that power is that you will likely suffer. So you're like, oh, I was good until right then. You will likely suffer. Christ suffered. I mean, we follow a suffering Savior. The New Testament seems to think that if you walk in the life of Jesus, you will encounter resistance, not just like some kind of American dream of blessing. You'll encounter challenges. You'll encounter messes in your life, not just beauty, because you're going against the grain. I mean, you put your hand against the grain of the wood, you're going to get splinters. And the scriptures seem to think that those who follow Jesus will encounter resistance and pain and pressure. If you are a person of integrity in this fallen world right now, you will get in trouble. If you're a person that tells the truth, if you're a person that loves people who other people say you have to cancel, that's going to be a problem. If you're a person who forgives when people say you're supposed to offer judgment, that's going to be a problem. Anybody like this sermon? I mean, because listen, here's what scriptures are supposed to do. They're supposed to help you understand the world as it really is. Isaiah, standing in the midst of a mess, says there's a way we're to honor God now, but let me tell you, these little things we're saying point to an actual king that will make all things new again. And his name is Jesus. Why does this matter? What's the significance? You're like, Jay, so you're telling me that all of these things don't necessarily help me right now. They'll help me a bit, but not really, not in the way I want it to help me. Yeah, in one sense, I am saying that to you. But I'm saying another thing, and this is really important to a chunk of you. If you don't have a life with Jesus, listen to this. What this means is that if Isaiah can tell you what Jesus is going to look like in really strange, specific ways, born of a virgin, out of this one region. By the way, this is going to happen through all of Isaiah. He describes exactly how Jesus is going to die. I mean, it's wild. If he can predict those things 700 years before they happen, and then they happen, but not all of the prophecies of Isaiah have been fulfilled in the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Some of them say they'll be fulfilled and when he returns. If he was that accurate 700 years in advance about his death, and he was accurate about his resurrection, is it possible he's accurate about what will come to pass in the future? It sure seems like he probably is. And that means that this man, Jesus, who died and rose again, is worth surrendering the whole of your life to in the midst of the mess, because he knows the way through death. He knows the way to a life everlasting. And it would seem that the scriptures would challenge you and say, surrender your life today in the midst of this mess so that you can experience the hope and the peace of that future now and secure the life that will matter for all time. I mean, how do we know we have a life of meaning? We're a part of the only story that will last forever. Believe it or not, most of the things you care about, you won't even care about not long from now. I was just talking to my daughter who's in high school, and I know this is going to be hard to believe, but as a teenage girl, she's dealing with some drama with friends at school. And I said to her, honey, here's what you don't know. Not long from now, you will not care about almost any of these people. I don't know how to convince you of that, but it's just true. I mean, very few of you in this room actually hang out or talk to anyone from high school, right? Like any of them. How many of you talk to, some of you are like, I do. Okay, well, good for you. You're the exception, okay? Few of you do. But even in that, you don't care about whatever you probably cared about then. I mean, most of those people are gone. There's a few exceptions. By and large, you don't care. And you could just see, she's looking at me, she's like, but it's really important now, Dad. And I'm like, that's true, because it's important to learn things for the future. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I am saying it doesn't matter the way you think it matters. Do you know that's true for you right now? There's some 10-year from now version of you that's like, you really cared about that? You were willing to fight till 2 a.m. about the dishes? Really? You were really stressed about that job? That was 4 jobs ago. But you were meant to learn something for who you become, for the sake of everything that God has for you. You were meant to learn how to trust God differently. You were meant to believe that his hope and his life is more valuable than whatever stupid thing you're trying to win right now. You were meant to learn that. Listen, what I love about the prophetic literature of the Old Testament as it runs in the New Testament is it tells us that if we can stay close to Jesus and his teaching, his hope, those things will matter 10,000 years from now. But almost nothing else will. And that can give us hope for who we're becoming and the life that we have with God. Amen?